All right, guys. So we're going to start session 2 here of understanding of multiplication and scaling. So I want you guys to be on page 429 of your workbooks. I don't think you'll need a whiteboard out as we go through this. All you'll need is your workbook in front of you, but you will be pausing the video to work in your workbook, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started here. Our start today, and this is kind of just a quick review on yesterday. I want to make sure that we understand again these three basic concepts. If I multiply a number by less than one, by one, or by more than one, and the difference is there. So 6 times 1/3. Now, is it going to be more or less than 6? That's the question I'm asking. So since I'm taking 6 and I'm multiplying it by a third is less than 1. This answer is going to be less than 6. Next one, 3 over 3 equals 1. 6 times 1 would be the same as 6. So any number that is multiplied by 1 stays itself. So this would be same as 6. And then lastly, again, we're looking at the number 6 and we're multiplying it by 5/3. 5/3 is more than 1. So if we multiply a number by more than 1, it is going to be greater than 6. Just a quick review over what we went over yesterday. So any number, if we multiply a number by less than 1, it's going to be less than that number. Same as 1, it stays the same. And then greater than 1, that number would be greater. Now, let's break this problem down just real quick here, because I want to make a point here. If I'm looking at the number 6, I'm only looking at the number 6 here, and I multiply it by 1/3, well, my answer is going to be less than 6 because I'm only looking at the number 6. So let's reverse that now. Let's reverse that, and let's look at the number or the fraction 1/3. If I take 1/3 and I multiply it by 6, well, 6 is greater than 1, so the answer would be more than 1/3. All right, so it would be more than 1/3 because I'm taking that 1/3 and I'm multiplying it by 6. 6 is greater than 1. So what we have to remember is, how is the person writing the question asking us to answer it? Are they asking us to look at the 6, or are they asking us to look at the 1/3? So we've got to be very careful there as we move forward through today. All right. So you guys, let's go ahead and look in our workbooks here. To page 429, and we're going to go to number 1. So number 1 on page 429, I'm gonna go ahead and say this. I'm going to show you guys the number lines. They are not going to be required for you guys to do. My biggest thing is, can we tell if a number is less than, greater than, or equal to by looking at what we're multiplying it by? That's it. I am never going to ask you to write down a number line to do this. Okay, I will give you the examples, but once you do independent work, I will not make you guys do that. So let's look at number 1. The first number line shows 3/4. That's here. And that does show 3/4. That's where the number stops. Now, it says show 1/3 times 3/4 on the second line. So on the second line, again, I'm going to write 3/4 here. And I'm going to make this same box that they did. Okay, and we call this 3/4 because here's one hole. I have 1, 2, 3 filled in out of 4. So there we go. There's 3/4. Now, it says we got to show 1/3 of or multiply 3/4. We know that multiply is the same as saying of. Let me change my color here real quick. So what it's telling me to do is, down here, it's telling me to show 1/3 of this color. So 1/3, I have 3 boxes filled out. I'm going to show 1/3 of it. Now, that's my answer is less than 3/4 because I only am doing 1/3 of 3/4. I'm not asking for a product. I'm asking you to tell me if it's less than or greater than. So here's my question. Here's what I want you guys to really focus on today. Is 1/3 times 3/4 less than, greater than, or equal to 3/4? So we are looking at the number 3/4. I am multiplying it by 1/3. 1/3 is less than 1. So this would be less than. All right. So it's less than 3/4 because I'm multiplying 3/4 by 1/3. All right. On further down here on page 429, again, we're gonna look at this, and I am going to model it for you. So again, we have 3/4 here. we have 3/4, and we've got to figure out if I shade in with blue here, is it going to be more or less than 3/4. So we should be able to follow along here. If I multiply 5/3, 5/3 is greater than 1, so the answer should be greater than 3/4. So let's see here. Now I need to shade in 5/3. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5/3. So I'm going to shade in 5/3. Now, the blue far outweighs the red, so that tells us that it's going to be greater than. So let's read our question here. Is 5/3 times 3/4 less than, greater than, equal to 3/4? So we're looking at 3/4, and we're multiplying it by a number that is greater than 1. So my answer is going to be greater than, right? So again, once we start doing these independent questions, all I'm going to ask you is to fill this out. That is it. So it should be a pretty technically easy day on that side. So one more time, I'm going to shade in 3/4. This time I'm going to do it in blue. And it says I'm going to shade in 3/3 of 3/4. Okay, so I'm going to shade in 3/3 of 3/4. So I only have 3 pieces here. I'm going to shade in all 3. And how the math looks is 3/3 times 3/4 less than, greater than, or equal to 3/4. So I'm looking at the number 3/4. I'm multiplying it by 1. So my answer is going to be equal to 3/4 because any number multiplied by 1 is itself. All right. And just real quick so we can kind of see this side of it as well. Area model, I'm going to shade in 3/4 here. 1, 2, and 3. And then the other way, I'm going to make thirds. So I'm multiplying by 1/3. And I'm going to shade in thirds in blue. And here's my third. Now, what it's asking is the number where they are both the same, or both colors are represented in the boxes, is right here. Is that more or less than 3/4? And that's got to be less than 3/4 because 1/3 is less, right? So again, I'm looking at 3/4. I'm multiplying it by a third. That is less than 3/4. All right. We're going to go ahead and skip number 5. And we're going to move to any 6. Now, here's what I want you to do. It says choose any model you like to show the product of 3/2 and 4/3 compares to 4/3. Then complete the comparison. All I want you guys to do is complete the comparison. If you want to multiply it out to see if it's greater than 4/3 and compare it, if that's a long process, if that's what you want to do, but you can do that. If not, I just want you to kind of look at the numbers and tell me. So go ahead and pause the video real quick and then write your answer and then come back and check your answer. All right. So here's what they're asking, guys. It says 3/2 times 4/3 is blank than 4/3. So I'm looking at the number 4/3, and then I am looking, it's being multiplied by 3/2. Well, 3/2 is 1.5 times. So if I multiply 4/3 times 1.5, it's obviously going to be greater. Not only is the fraction greater, but it also tells us 1.5 times as many. So this would be greater than. And if you really wanted to show how that works, and you guys may do this, I highly doubt it. 3 times 4 is 12. 2 times 3 is 6. I divide that out. That is 2. My answer is greater than 4/3 because 2 is greater than 4/3. So either way you want to do that, if you do want to work it out, you can. Not necessary. No one is asking for a product. Okay, here's what I want you guys to go ahead and do. We are going to skip on page 431 here. We are going to skip number 1. I want you to go ahead and do number 2. Use the example showing 3/2 times 2/5. We don't necessarily need to see that. Which statements correctly describe how the product compares to one of its factors? So here's what I'm going to say, guys. Understand what fraction they're asking you to look at. See how they're multiplied together and give me an answer. So go ahead and pause this video and then we will come back and look at it once you're done. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this one. Again, I'm just going to go A, B, C, D, E here and kind of talk about them and go through these. So let's go with A. 3 halves times 2 fifths is 1 and 1/2 times 2 fifths. Okay, so this is a different type of question. It does not say is it greater than, less than, or equal to. It just says is it 1 and 1/2 times as many. So we kind of had to have some number sense here. So 2 fifths, and we got to look at what we're multiplying it by. And we're multiplying it by 3 halves. Well, 3 halves is the same as 1 and 1/2, or 1 and 1 over 2. And we're multiplying it by 2 fifths. So A is going to be correct. That's a tough one. Okay, that's going to be the toughest one of this question. So A is going to be correct. B, 3 halves times 2 fifths is equal to 3 halves. So we're looking at 3 halves, and that means we'd have to be, if it's going to be equal to, we'd have to be multiplying it by 1. Well, 2 fifths is less than 1, definitely not 1. So B is not correct. C, 3 halves times 2 fifths is less than 2 fifths. So I'm looking at the number 2 fifths. I need something that's less. Well, 3 halves is more than 1. So that product is going to be greater than 2 fifths. Not going to work. D, 3 halves times 2 fifths is greater than 3 halves. So I'm looking at the number 3 halves. What am I multiplying it by? 2 fifths. Well, that's less than 1, so it cannot be greater. Will not work. And then lastly, E, 3 halves times 2 fifths is greater than 2 fifths. I'm looking at the number 2 fifths. I'm multiplying it by 3 halves. Well, this number is greater than 1, so my answer would be greater than 2 fifths. So A and E are my correct answers there. All right, let's go and go to the next page. Again, I'm not going to ask you guys to shade in a number line, so we're going to skip that. Just for extra practice, I do want you guys to do this area model here. I want you to fill that in and shade it. So shade in 5/8 going up and down for columns, and I want you to make 3 fifths going sideways. And then shade that in. And then down to number 5, you're going to look at the models, and you're going to tell me, is it 3 fifths times 5/8? Is that greater than, less than, or equal to 5/8? Okay, and you're not going to worry about the rest. You're just going to 10 minutes. Go ahead and pause the video, come back, and let's look at that together. All right, so I asked you guys to first, let's go ahead and shade in 5/8 here, and I'm going to kind of do it a little messy here. So 5/8, I'm going to shade it in. And this is just practice. It does not have anything to do with us answering the question, how we're doing it. And then I've got to make 2 fifths. So now I've got 5 rows, and I need to shade in 3 of them. So my answer, guys, would be for this would be the amount of squares that have both colors represented out of how many's in the one hole. Okay, so again, we're not necessarily worried about what that looks like. So let's get down here to our question. 3 fifths times 5/8. Is it greater than or less than 5/8? So we're looking at the number 5/8, and we're multiplying it by 3 fifths. Well, 3 fifths is less than 1, so the answer has to be less than 5/8. So if you wrote less than 5/8, hey, you're right on. All right, and then last one, and I really do like this one. I'm going to let you read this one by yourself. Come back, check your answers. Go ahead and do that. All right, guys. So we have 3 options. We have never, A, B is sometimes, and C is always. So A, when you multiply a given fraction by a fraction that is equal to 1, the product will blank be equal to the original fraction. And that is going to be C. It will always be equal to the original fraction because any number multiplied by itself is that same number. All right. B, when you multiply a given fraction by a factor less than 1, the product will be blank greater than the given fraction. That is never. If we multiply it by less than 1, it will always be less than the given factor. And then C, when you multiply a given fraction by a factor greater than 1, the product will blank less than 1. When you multiply a given fraction by a factor greater than 1, it will never be less than 1. Never, because the factor is greater than 1. Could never do that. All right, so we have always and never there. All right, guys. So I'm going to kind of go over here is what you guys have after this video. Make sure you do that interactive practice. It is for a grade. Your fluency, which I'm getting ready to give you an example of, will need to be submitted. I will check that tomorrow. And then your daily math day 4. So here's what your fluency looks like. We are going to skip number 1. We are going to skip number 2. And we're going to do number 3. And it's more than 3 questions. I believe it's 9. And I like this because it gives you guys a lot of practice over what we just did. So I'm just going to do a couple with you here. Write less than, equal to, or greater than for each statement. So I'm looking at 1/4 times 4/5 is blank, then 4/5. So I'm looking at the number 4/5 and I multiply it by a half. Well, if I multiply that by something that's less than 1, it is going to be less than 4/5. All right. So the same thing, 2 over 2 times 4/5 is blank, then 4/5. Well, 2 is equal to 1. I'm looking at the number 4/5. I multiplied it by 2 over 2. So that is going to be equal to. And then lastly, 3/2 times 4/5. I'm looking at the number 4/5. 3/2 is greater than 1, so it would be greater than. All right, guys, I hope this video helps. If you need to go back and look at something, please do to help you out. Make sure the fluency gets done. Make sure the interactive practice gets done. Make sure that your teacher assigned lesson gets done. That is it from me. So hopefully I will see you guys soon.